Hey guys, Ronan Talkin here. I wanted to do a brief video on semi-bluffing the turn and conversely about thin value and pot control. I said on 2+2 that I think pot control is one of the most incorrectly used and most often misunderstood theories in poker. I think that you get a really great glimmer of this in Bart Hansen's videos, where he says things like the bet fold is the live player's bread and butter. You don't want to pot control against certain villains because you should be getting value with those hands. And I want to go through and talk about the difference between pot control and thin value on the turn, when you should be doing it and when you should be doing the other. So, remember the theorem of polarization emerging. I'll try to not just read this thing as I just did. But if your opponent is really likely to call, then obviously you want to value bet against him. If your opponent is not very likely to call, then there's not much value to be had. If he's very likely to raise, then he's going to be forcing you to fold your thin value hands a very exploitable amount of the time. So you should polarize your betting range. Thin value on the turn. So you're merging your range. Just like pre-flop, if you watch the pre-flop videos, I go into decent depth about this. There's an article on 2+2 about it, as on my website. There's a link to it. So you believe your opponent's calling very often, and he's not raising very often. He's only raising hands that beat you, so you can comfortably bet fold your thin value. This is where Bart Hansen's line comes in, because he's a live player, and live players just generally don't semi-bluff the turn. And because of that, he's allowed to value bet extremely liberally and bet fold a very exploitable range, but he's doing it exploitatively. He's getting all the value from his hands, and that's basically what carries you as a professional live player. So don't make the mistake of pot controlling when you should in fact be thin value betting, as you almost always should in a live game. First example, both the examples are the same hand, exactly, and this actually occurred almost identically in a 500-0 live game that I played a couple months ago. The villain misplayed both hands. He bet called aces in this spot both times, and the first time he was incorrect, his opponent had trips, and then the second time it was against me, and I had a combo draw, and I thought that he would recall bet calling being incorrect the previous time, so not that I wouldn't semi-bluff as a standard, but I was extremely comfortable in my semi-bluff I had a combo draw on the turn. So, villain is a live regular. He's not capable of semi-bluffing the turn. So basically, he's raising with trips or better. We doubt that he's overvaluing like jacks or something like that, though that's definitely something you need to take into account when structuring your range. But generally, he's just going to be raising with better hands, and he's going to be calling with all of his worse hands. So, you raise with aces, you get called. The flop is 8-6-5, two-tone. There's a lot of draws on that board, obviously. We c-bet it, we get called. Again, we c-bet. This is a very similar question as on the turn. Against me, it's probably incorrect to c-bet this board with a vast portion of your range. Aces is probably fine, but I'm going to put you to a very difficult decisions rather often. And then the 8 of clubs, which is pretty much the nut bluffing card here, comes, because now we can represent, trips, and this is exactly how I would play trips. Now we have a lot of more hands that we're bluffing as well. So backdoor clubs. That's what I had in the previous example. Though I would have raised the flop with the straight draw or the combo draw with spades, but I had to combo draw with clubs with a weak straight draw. And this was the perfect turn for me to shove as a bluff. So when our hero should bet fold in this scenario, because he's playing against station. Our opponent's going to call with 9s plus. He's going to call with 7x on occasion. He's going to call with all his draws. So we're getting a lot of value from worse hands, and we're not going to be folding exploitably, though we are exploitable. So bet fold. Every time he raises, he beats you, so comfortably bet fold. It's pretty easy. Your range might look like this for betting the turn. It's pretty simple. You just find your best hands and you bet them. We're betting, all our... basically this range is 7s plus and draws. Notice that all these ace-x hands are clubs and spade draws, as are the king X and the jack X and the queen X. Now we're pot controlling. So when you talk about pot control, you should realize that you're in fact polarizing your range. You're betting the top of your range and air. The percentage of air that you're betting is kind of, it's very variable. But as is of course your stack off range. But you are checking back that middling equity range because there's not equity to be had with it. So you believe your opponent will be raising too high a frequency and not calling often enough to make a bet plus expected value. So you can check call these hands and pot control them instead, or check back if you're in position. So the exact same hand, except this time our villain is an online regular. He's capable of semi-bluffing the turn, though not capable of bluffing air. He will recognize that 9s plus do not beat anything in your value range if you bet, so he's probably going to fold. Though you aren't sure if he believes you will be bluffing a high frequency. If you're bluffing a high frequency, then 9s plus are the same hand as aces, are the same hand as, well, many hands. So he might believe that he benefits from hand equivalency and thus call, but it's likely that he would just give up with 9s plus, with at least a decent frequency. It's just hard to say. Everyone approaches that spot with a big question mark, I guess, because again, he has the middling equity hand, as do we. So we're pot controlling the same hands. So we're in middle position with aces. Hero raises to 4 big blinds, villain calls, yet again, exact same board, and then the turn's the 8 of clubs. What do? You should check call. He's not calling with worse hands, so when we value bet, we don't get called by much worse. He's